Oh, hey there. How are you? Seeing as how it's the middle of October, I bet you came around here for a spooky story for Halloween, not to watch me get firewood, though it is well-seasoned red oak. Okay, I'll tell you what, I'll make a deal with you. You let me have about 45 seconds to tell you about this really cool wood cart. Then I'm going to tell you a really creepy story. The creepiest of all, because it's 110% true. All right, so I'll finish getting my firewood after the story. I want to point out that tonight's story is brought to you by Beaver, and particularly this totally awesome Beaver wood cart. Now let me tell you a little bit about this cart. It takes all of 10 minutes to put it together. I didn't take your time or mine to record that part for the video because it literally takes about 10 minutes. The only thing you have to snap together is this part and this part to the middle part and put on the wheels. There's just 4 bolts with nuts, one here, one here, one there. And then the wheels are held on with cotter pins. It really is that simple. You need to slip the axle through there. I'll show you the axle. And I just lost a piece of wood, but I'll get in a second. Slip the axle through. Literally, it takes 10 minutes, okay? Let me get this out of the way for story time. That Beaver cart, by the way, also comes with a bungee strap to secure your load. And the only safety feature that I feel compelled to point out to you here before I do away with the cart and get right into the story is that it's recommended you do not fill it past this level. So what I always do is I take the bungee strap and I attach it to the bottom, come across the top of the wood, around the recommended height, the frame right there, and then I go back down and attach back to the axle. I've never had a problem. This cart's brand new, but I've used one just like it for many years. Beaver asked me if I wanted to demo it again since it's firewood season. I said, heck yeah. So guess what? Somebody I know is getting a Beaver wood cart for Halloween because I don't need 2 of them. But I absolutely wanted to show you that. I will put the link for that Beaver cart in the description box below. It can haul up to 250 pounds worth of firewood. And believe it or not, it's selling for the extremely low price as of this recording of only $53.99. Beaver, tough tools, half price. It's the lowest priced competitor brand I was able to find was like $75. So highly recommend it. Now, let's get into the story. It is October, and I haven't been out here as much as I'd like to because I've actually been going around and enjoying my October with my family and with some friends. And as a matter of fact, just yesterday, last night, my beautiful bride Dearly, aka Giggly Girl, and myself and our son Daniel and one of his friends, good kid, friends with the whole family, we went to Hallow Scream at Busch Gardens. Again, if you're familiar with that, Busch Gardens in Williamsburg, Virginia, in the month of October, they do this awesome thing called Hallow Scream. At 6 p.m., it's when it starts, even though the rides are open all day, but they have people dressed up in costume like ghosts and ghouls and monsters, and they come out and they jump scare you through the whole theme park. They're playing creepy music everywhere. They've got fog everywhere. They've got 5 or 6 haunted houses. We went through almost all of them last night. A couple of them were closed because it was raining and they did have a hurricane moving in and they had some flood warnings along the coast. But we still had a great time. So I hope you are enjoying your Halloween season. And I'm going to make it more enjoyable now with this tale. Now that I've taken up a lot of time, I'm getting into the story. Hey, that's how I roll, brah. Okay, so I was kind of reminded of this story. It's one I've told in part before. I haven't put it in writing yet, but it's coming. It's going to have to go into a true hauntings volume. It's a family history story, kind of, and it is true. So I guess I always thought that my family's lineage, as far as career choice went, was either coal mines or lumber mills. I come from West by God, Virginia, Appalachia, grew up there. I live over in the motherland of Virginia now. But on both sides, going back for as far back as we can trace our families, folks either earn their living in the coal mines or the lumber mills. Got accidental coal mine deaths on some sides, timbering deaths on the other. But I recently, just in recent years, found out that human trafficking has also been a part of my family's lineage. But listen, I broke the cycle, and I'm going to explain. I broke the cycle of the coal mines, the lumber mills, and the human trafficking by doing everything the right way. We'll get to that. I was reminded of this story on the way back from Williamsburg today, coming back to where we live in Central Virginia, and we saw a car carrier, and I remember hearing a story about how there was a human trafficking channel that was, they would use car carriers and they would actually smuggle people by putting them in cars and on the carrier, and a state trooper happened to be behind the carrier and saw some heads bobbing up and down in the cars, pulled them over, and that's how they got busted. So I was telling my wife that story, and I was reminded of my very own grandmother and my technically great grandfather, and how they came to be and how I would later come to be because of this. But basically, my great-grandfather was a human trafficking pirate. He was a pirate on the high seas. He was from Nova Scotia. He had mansions in Nova Scotia, Canada, I believe Greenland, and Boston, Massachusetts, okay? One of my sisters found this out by doing one of those Ancestry.com searches, and her mind was blown, and when she told me, my mind was equally blown. But basically it boils down to this. Here's the story, and there's so many stories in this story. There's a story of human trafficking, pirating, serendipity, and a ghost cat. So my great-grandfather was a pirate. There was still a lot of immigrants coming over from Ireland to the New World in the first part of the 1900s, late part of the 1800s, and this was when he was really doing his pirating. The U.S. government never really pursued him for prosecution because at the time there was no Coast Guard, and if they lost a ship, be it a military ship or a cruise liner or a passenger ship was trying to cross the Atlantic, they would go to my great-grandfather because they knew he was the best seaman of his era, and they would say, hey, we lost this ship. Can you find it? Can you save all these lost souls? And he would do it. And of course, he'd charge him a ton of money to do it. And he once rescued a ship that had 227 passengers on it, hauled it back in. So then when the U.S. government actually did decide to set up a Coast Guard, they went to my great-grandfather and said, how do we do this? Make us the blueprint, please. So my great-grandfather designed the Coast Guard. This is a true story. I know this sounds like one of Crazy Lake's tall tales, and yes, I see that thing back there behind me too. That's why I got to do this, because I forgot. Get my 6. Yeah, I see it, but I didn't see it there when I started recording to watch it to see if it slips right back out of frame. It's almost Halloween, so the veil is getting very thin. There's a lot of creepy stuff going on, and I'm up here, as you saw me coming up the trail. I'm where land meets sky, field over here meets forest. There was some rain earlier. I mean, all this stuff accumulates to creepy, thinning of the veil, things coming out of their side into ours, okay? So that's the deal. My great-grandfather was this pirate. So I guess he had kidnapped he would kidnap immigrants coming over from Ireland, and he would impress the men into service. He would sell the women, sell the children, just do whatever. I mean, wherever the money was to be made, that's what he would do, okay? Well, I guess he liked my grandmother. She was a little girl. I mean, she was under 10 years old. And I'm not going to go into too much detail with this. Use your imagination. It's very sad. It's very disgusting. But that he kept her for his own personal purposes. He was married, and they attempted to make it look like they were raising this little girl as their daughter. But we have every reason to believe, because of how things went down, as you're about to hear, that that's not quite what was happening. Clearly there was abuse, and the abuse was such that when she was 15 years old, she ran away. She ended up going to West By God, Virginia. That's how that part of my family gets its roots there. I think the other half had been there since they probably came down and settled. Probably Germans from Pennsylvania, I would imagine. I don't know. I'm not sure. And this is common in Appalachia. I'm not just taking a dig here on my biological family of origin, who I'm estranged from mostly due to toxicity and abuse. There's a lot of folks out there who erroneously think that you have to have a relationship with people just because they're family, especially if it's parents. Listen, folks, no, you don't. You do not have to have a relationship with anybody who is abusive to you, who is disrespectful, who is no good. I have a gauge I use in regard to everybody. If I spend time with someone, if I'm in the presence with someone, and then once that time being spent with that person ceases, if I feel better than I did before I spent time with that person, I look forward to spending time with that person again, and I'll probably spend time with that person again. However, if once that person leaves my presence, if I feel worse than I did before I spent time with that person, I go out of my way to kind of avoid that person. Now, sometimes maybe I'm in a bad mood, having a bad day, but if I get around that person again, and once again, I'm feeling worse, you hear that motorcycle? I wouldn't be surprised if that's not the October Rider. And if you read October Nights Part 2, 31 More Tales for the Halloween season, you know what I'm talking about, that October Rider. It's about the time of year he comes around here on that dirt bike. All right, so anyway, yeah, but if it's reconfirmed or confirmed to me, I feel worse, haven't been around this person, I just won't go around them. Okay, so that's enough on that. Just a little life lesson for you there. So anyway, my sisters found out about our grandmother, and I said to them, and this is something, I've got a good friend who recently left a marriage. She was in a marriage for a long time. She was married to an abusive narcissist. He was a deadbeat. He didn't work. He didn't earn. He didn't contribute to the family household monetarily. And they had 4 kids. And she finally left him. Of course, I'm not going to go into detail, but I asked her, I said to her, first of all, congratulations. I'm so happy you finally made that decision. I said, but I've been wondering for years, why did it take so long? She had a valid reason. She honestly feared, because he always threatened that he would take the kids and she'd never see him again, and that he would kill her. And she believed both. So I get it. And I wasn't in her situation, and so I'm not going to judge and say, well, you should have left years ago because you did this much more damage to the kids. You did this much more damage to herself. Listen, that's one of the reasons combat veterans like myself don't talk to a lot of folks, pretty much anybody who wasn't in combat, even if they served in the military but they never deployed, because you'll tell a story. Somebody will ask and you'll tell a story, and they'll often say, they'll say, oh, that never happened, I don't believe you. Or they'll say, oh, that's crazy that you handled it that way. Well, if I'd have been there, I would have done this. You're lucky you didn't get killed. I would have done that. Listen, folks, if you're not in somebody's shoes, you don't know what it feels like to walk in them. So combat veterans quickly learn, once we get back, after you have that conversation 2 or 3 times, just not to talk about it with other people. But the reason my grandmother didn't leave earlier, she was 15 when she left, and I asked my sisters, why didn't she leave? It's because she had a cat, and she was in love with her cat. I guess her cat was got some weird cackles coming out of the woods, folks. Keep getting my 6. But her cat was her comfort, and she was worried about the cat. She couldn't just run away and take this cat. I mean, she was 15 by the time she did leave. Okay, so I was a little judgmental when I first heard it, but, a little bit older now, a little bit more experience with life, and I know, if someone's not in your position, they really can't say, okay? So that's the story. That's the history of the human trafficking, the piracy, the kidnapping, the runaway. Now, here's where the serendipity comes in, and the story about the ghost. So, 110% true story. This would have been about 3 years ago now, 3.5 years ago. My beautiful bride, Dearly, a.k.a. Giggly Girl, kind of had a side hustle going on. She had a friend who cleaned for very affluent people here in the area, and she asked her if she wanted to help her sometime. So my wife would help this woman maybe once or twice a week. They would spend like 4 or 5 hours cleaning houses that didn't even need clean. It's like most of the time these people were at another house they owned somewhere else in the world. I mean, I'm talking deca millionaires, and like my wife and her friend would go in there and like dust, and then they'd get like $500 each. It was crazy. It was just hard to say no to that. So we went one morning. This was before Dearly was driving. Now she's driving now. She's out in her Mercedes-Benz right now as I record this video, picking up our son from football practice. It's really wonderful. That gives me the time to like do more. So I'm able to make this video tonight because I'm not having to pick up our son. But at the time she wasn't driving. So I 7 o'clock in the morning. I would drive her. We'd stop at this one place to pick up her friend. And her friend was running 20 minutes late that day. And it was like a gas station / convenience store. So I told Dearly, I said, well, you know, I was going to go home and eat when I got home, and I'm hungry. I'm just going to go in here and see if they've got some breakfast biscuits. So I went in there. They did. So I'm paying, and I start small talking with the cashier. And she was probably 60-ish. And we're just small talking. There was nobody else in there. It was a Sunday morning, slow as could be, 7 a.m. And I told her, you know, we're waiting for a friend, just kind of hanging out, waiting on a friend. And I noticed that this woman had a Boston accent because my mother and everybody on that side of the family had Boston accents. So I said, are you from Boston? And she says, well, I am actually. You can hear it in you know, my voice. I said, yeah. And I told her what I just told you, why I recognize the accent so well. And so she starts talking about her childhood, and she starts talking about growing up in a haunted mansion. I said, a haunted mansion? That's interesting. Because, and then I mentioned to her what I do. I write about the paranormal, the supernatural, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, cryptozoology, all this stuff. Go out there and do some field research, some studies, walk around through the woods like an idiot looking for him, her, it, or they. And no, I'm not woke. I just don't know if he, she, it, or they want to be called Bigfoot or Sasquatch. So I use Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and him, her, it, or they. So dude, I'm not like gender identifying them like a chicken, you know, when I see one or we pick one up on camera. I'm not like zooming in with the lens and getting out my jeweler's freaking eye. You know what I mean? Trust me, I'm as far away from woke as you can get. All right, so anyway, she says that the house was haunted. I said, ooh, by a ghost of what, a previous owner? She says, no, a cat. I'm like, a cat? What do you mean a cat? And then she goes, it's a crazy story. You'll never believe it. I said, try me. This is kind of what I'm into. You'd be surprised. I probably would believe it. So she says, okay, the mansion used to belong to a pirate. She says, you may have heard of him. He's kind of famous. His name is, and she said the name. I'm not going to say the name, but you guys can Google this. Anybody knows how to use Google will be able to find out who I'm talking about. And I said, actually, I do know that pirate because that's my great-grandfather. And she starts laughing, and she goes, no, seriously, but I got to tell you this story about the cat. And I said, first of all, cat. And then I say, well, second of all, no, I'm not kidding. That really was my great-grandfather. And so I told her the story I just told you. So then she told me the story about the cat, which was the ghost. So her mother, and this is ironic, she was adopted. My grandmother was adopted. That was the story. That's what I thought until I was almost 50. Turns out my grandmother was kidnapped. Long and short of it is that her adopted parents converted the mansion into a bed and breakfast. And she never saw this, nor did her parents. But they had numerous guests who in the morning, after they'd spent the night or a couple of nights before, they would say something to the effect of, that was so nice of your cat to come sleep with me in bed. Or, where's your cat? I haven't seen it all morning. And every time they would say, we don't have a cat. And all the guests, different as they were, different people from different parts of the country, described the cat as a black cat with like a white patch on its throat. And it always slept in the bed of this one particular room, which I'm thinking was probably my grandmother's room when she was a child. So it's as if the ghost of the cat remains in the mansion so that, like it's waiting for my grandmother to return. And my grandmother probably died 25 years ago, and she was in her 80s at the time. Wow. So there is a very creepy true story about ghosts, the cat, kidnapping, human trafficking. And yes, I've broken all the cycles, even though I do kind of perform lumberjack duties here because we do heat our house with wood in the winter. And I chop and split and cut a lot of my own wood. I don't work in a lumber mill. I did for a time, got out of that, went into the brokerage business, learned about finance and economics and business. The rest is history. Never went into the coal mines. And as far as human trafficking goes, let's see, my great-grandfather did it. I have uncles that did it. They did 30-year stretches in federal penitentiaries. They would traffic mostly young women from the border of Mexico up through the New England states. I broke that cycle as well. Yes, my beautiful bride dearly, a.k.a. Giggly Girl, is Filipina, but I met her in the Philippines while I was there legally with a passport. We entered into an agreeable, consensual relationship, just as if I was dating anybody back home anywhere else in the world. And I brought her to this country on her own will through legal means with a fiance visa. We're now married, and she has since become a legal U.S. citizen. Been back and forth to the Philippines many times since then. No problem getting back in because she's not from here originally, whatever the scare tactics they use. Every time we go over to visit family, people are like, oh no, Trump might not let her back in. We're like, oh no, you don't know quite as much as you think you do. It's amazing how when you obey the law and go through the legal process, you'll never have a problem. And we're going back for Christmas. We can't wait. Going to be over there for a few weeks in the middle of winter. But I broke all those chains. Coal mining, lumber milling, and human trafficking. So, I hope you enjoyed this creepy story. I'll see you for more next time. We still got about 18 days left before Halloween, so I plan on getting up here and telling you some more awesome stories from the most awesomest homesteading channel on the planet that typically doesn't have anything whatsoever to do with homesteading. Homesteading off the grid. See you for more next time.